All right, so we're going to jump into Nehemiah chapters 7 through 9.
Yeah.
Get ready to go deeper than just bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
We're talking about a city with newly built walls. Yeah, but what about the people inside?
Yeah, it's a fascinating transition from those previous chapters. We move from, this intense external reconstruction project to the more intricate work of internal revival.
Yeah.
It's like they finished building the house and now it's time to make it a home.
Oh, I love that analogy. Okay, so that takes us right to chapter 7. And honestly, a part that could seem a bit dry at first glance, all that genealogical record keeping.
Yeah, you wouldn't think lists of names would be a page turner.
Right.
But this was a vital step. Imagine you've gone through generations of exile, captivity. Your sense of belonging has been shattered.
Right.
This record keeping, it wasn't just bureaucracy. It was about reclaiming their identity as God's covenant people.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's like if my family had been through something so traumatic, wouldn't I claim to those connections, to knowing where I came from?
Exactly. Think about it this way. Knowing your ancestors, faced famine, say, and made it through, doesn't that give you courage when you hit tough times?
Oh, for sure.
For the Israelites, this was a moment of profound reconnection to their heritage, their place in this epic story.
Well, okay, so now those names aren't just names anymore. They're survivors. They're links in a chain leading right up to this moment of rebuilding.
Exactly.
Powerful stuff.
And that sense of shared identity, of a people united, it's absolutely crucial for what unfolds in these following chapters.
Okay, because then we get to chapter 8, where Ezra reads the law aloud all day long. Can you imagine that scene?
Oh, yeah.
It's like everyone's holding their breath, hearing these words maybe for the very first time.
And then they weep, and not from, physical hardship this time, but because hearing God's law laid bare, it makes them realize how far they've strayed.
Wow.
It's heartbreaking, but also this incredible moment of collective conviction.
Talk about a gut punch. But then right in the middle of all that heaviness comes that famous line, "The joy of the Lord is your strength."
Yeah.
Almost like a light breaking through the clouds.
It's one of those paradoxes that's so profound.
Right.
Yes, recognizing our failings is painful, but it's supposed to lead us to a place of joy, not ignoring the wrongdoing, but finding the strength to move forward through forgiveness and renewal.
So wait, so it's like admitting you messed up is the key to unlocking actual joy. Explain that one.
Think of it this way. Imagine carrying around this heavy secret, this shame, confessing it, even though it's scary, is like putting down a huge weight.
Yeah.
The relief, the knowing you're loved despite your flaws, that's where the strength comes from to actually change.
Okay, so we've got this massive wave of repentance, folks realizing they need to get back on track.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop there, right? Chapter 9 takes us even deeper. What's going on there?
Chapter 9 is where they get specific. It's not just a general, oops, we're sorry. This is a detailed collective confession listing out their failures. Imagine standing there and publicly acknowledging all the ways you've fallen short.
Yeah.
It's incredibly vulnerable.
Sometimes when I think I've messed up, my instinct is to downplay it, Sure. But these guys are laying it all out there. No sugarcoating.
And what's remarkable is that they juxtapose their failings with God's constant faithfulness throughout history. It's like they're reminding themselves and each other, even when we messed up, he never did. His love didn't waver. It's incredibly humbling.
Yeah, it's like they're setting the stage right, saying, okay, we've been terrible, but God's been amazing, so, and no W.
Now comes the covenant renewal. This is where they formally, publicly commit to living differently, to aligning their lives with God's will.
So it's not just about feeling bad, it's about action. This commitment to change, to live out your repentance. Is that something we can connect with today?
Absolutely. Think about your own life, those moments when you realize you've drifted from your values. Do you wallow in the guilt, or does that spark a desire to make a real change?
Right.
This is the Israelites choosing the latter, but on a massive scale.
They're not just saying, we're sorry. They're saying, here's how we're going to be different.
Right.
This is serious stuff.
And I think that's one of the most powerful aspects of the story. We see an entire community, after hitting rock bottom, choosing hope, choosing to rebuild. That's got to be inspiring, right?
It really is. And I think what strikes me is that the book of Nehemiah doesn't shy away from the messiness of it all.
Yeah.
It acknowledges those times when the, small steps feel impossible, when the walls seem too high to rebuild.
It's true. There's this raw honesty in Nehemiah's story. He doesn't pretend it was easy, that there weren't moments of doubt, discouragement, even outright opposition.
Yeah. It's almost like he's saying, hey, look, rebuilding is tough work. There will be days when you want to give up. But then there's this underlying message of hope that keeps breaking through.
And I think that's where the joy of the Lord becomes so essential. It's not just a reward for when things are good. It's the fuel that keeps us going when things are tough.
So it's like when I'm facing one of those I want to give up moments, That's actually the time to lean in even harder to that source of joy.
Exactly, because it's in those moments when we're most vulnerable that we can experience the depth of God's grace and strength in a whole new way.
It's funny because sometimes I think we get this idea that joy is a destination, something we achieve once we've got everything figured out. But this story is saying something totally different.
It's saying joy is the companion on the journey, not the trophy at the end. It's what empowers us to keep moving forward even when we can't see the finish line.
So even though we're focusing on Nehemiah, this idea of joy as fuel feels way bigger than just this one book, right?
Absolutely. It's a thread that runs throughout the entire Bible, from the resilience of the Israelites escaping Egypt, to the early Christians facing persecution, to the countless stories of everyday people choosing faith over fear. It's all powered by that deep, abiding joy.
It's like this hidden superpower that's available to all of us, but we have to choose to tap into it. And maybe that's part of what it means to rebuild our walls,
Yeah.
to create space in our lives for that joy to flow.
Beautifully put. It's about recognizing that even in the midst of brokenness, even when things feel impossible, there's this wellspring of hope and strength waiting to be discovered.
And the really cool thing is that we don't have to do it alone, just like the Israelites had each other. We've got this incredible community of people who are on the same journey.
That's so important to remember, whether it's our family, friends, church community, or even online groups. We weren't meant to navigate these deep dives alone.
So as we wrap up this exploration of Nehemiah, let's leave our listeners with something to chew on. If the joy of the Lord is your strength, where are you drawing your strength from these days? What are those practices, those relationships, those moments that fill your tank and empower you to keep rebuilding?
It's a question worth pondering because the answer just might change your life.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. We'll see you in the next one. Happy exploring.
It really is. And this idea of choosing hope, choosing rebuilding, even when things are tough, it ties back to that powerful statement we discussed earlier. The joy of the Lord is your strength.
It's easy to read that as just a nice inspirational quote, but the way they're living it out here, it takes on a whole new dimension.
Exactly. It's not just a feeling, it's an active force that's driving their actions, their commitment to change.
So it's like even in the middle of this massive rebuilding project with all the challenges they're facing, the joy is what fuels them.
I think so for the Israelites. Joy wasn't just happiness. It was deeply tied to their covenant with God, this sense of belonging, of being chosen. It was a source of strength that went beyond circumstance.
Okay, that makes sense. But for someone listening today, how do we tap into that? I mean, the world feels pretty complicated and joy can feel fleeting.
That's a great question. And I think it starts with recognizing that the joy of the Lord isn't dependent on, external things going perfectly.
Right.
It's an inner strength that comes from knowing you're loved and forgiven no matter what.
So it's like even when I'm dealing with, work stress or family drama or whatever, there's this deeper well of joy I can draw from.
Exactly. And it might sound counterintuitive, but sometimes those tough moments when we're forced to confront our own weakness are the ones that push us closer to that source of true strength.
I think about those people standing there making this covenant. They've messed up, they've been through a lot, but there's this determination to do better, and it's powered by joy. It's actually pretty inspiring.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that true change, lasting change, doesn't come from guilt or shame, but from that deeper place of love and acceptance.
So it's not about beating ourselves up for our mistakes. It's about recognizing them, learning from them, and then moving forward with that joy-fueled strength to do better.
Precisely. And I think there's another important element here, something that often gets overlooked when we talk about individual transformation, the role of community.
Oh yeah, the Israelites were definitely not going it alone.
Think about it. They gather together to hear the law, to confess their sins, to renew their covenant. They're doing this as a people, supporting each other, holding each other accountable.
Makes you wonder, what could happen if we applied that kind of communal approach to our own lives, right?
Imagine the strength we could find, the changes we could make if we committed to supporting each other in our own journeys of growth and transformation.
Okay, that's making me rethink my whole lone wolf approach to personal growth. But seriously, there's something powerful about that idea of collective action fueled by shared joy.
And it's not just about the big dramatic moments. Think about the everyday ways we can encourage each other, celebrate small victories, offer a listening ear when things are tough.
It's like maybe that's how we keep the joy of the Lord flowing, not just as this abstract concept, but as a real tangible force in our lives and communities.
Beautifully put. And it reminds us that this journey of rebuilding, of renewal, it's not meant to be a solo mission. We need each other.
This whole conversation has me thinking about the walls in my own life that need rebuilding those areas. where I've maybe let things crumble or where I'm still struggling to find that joy-fueled strength, it's a lot to process.
It is, and it's important to remember that this isn't about achieving some kind of instant perfect transformation. It's a journey. There will be setbacks. There will be times when we stumble.
But the fact that the Israelites, after all they'd been through, could experience this kind of renewal, it gives me hope. Hope that maybe I can do the same.
And you can, we all can, because that same grace that empowered them is available to us today.
Okay, so how do we move from inspiration to action?
Yeah.
What's the first brick we lay in rebuilding our own walls?
That's a question each of us has to answer for ourselves, but I think it starts with a willingness to be honest with ourselves, to identify those areas where we've strayed, and to ask for God's help in taking those first steps back towards Him.
So it's about acknowledging where we are being open to change,
Yeah.
and then trusting that we don't have to do it alone.
Exactly, and I think it's important to remember that those first steps don't have to be huge, monumental leaps.
Small steps fueled by joy. I like it. But doesn't it get discouraging when those small steps feel so small?
That's where celebrating those small victories comes in, recognizing each step forward, no matter how tiny, is a win.
So it's like retraining our brains to focus on the progress, not just the distance we still have to cover.
Exactly, and remembering that every brick laid, every step taken, is bringing us closer to that place of wholeness, of restoration, of truly living out the joy of the Lord.
And that's what this deep dive into Nehemiah has been all about, right? It's not just a history lesson. It's a roadmap.
A roadmap that shows us it's never too late to rebuild, to renew, to rediscover that deep well of joy that's available to each of us. It really is. And I think what's remarkable is how it all culminates in chapter 9. This is where it gets really personal. It's not just a general, this is a detailed collective confession.
Yeah.
Imagine standing there publicly acknowledging every way you've fallen short.
It's got to be humbling.
Incredibly. And what's powerful is how they weave their confession with this recounting of God's faithfulness throughout history.
Yeah.
It's like they're reminding themselves, even when we messed up, God never did.
It's setting the stage right for this turning point, this covenant renewal.
Exactly. This is where they formally, publicly commit to living differently, aligning their lives with God's will.
It's not just an apology. It's a commitment to change a promise, to live out their repentance in a tangible way.
And I think that's what makes this story so powerful. We see an entire community, after hitting rock bottom, choosing hope, choosing to rebuild their lives and their relationship with God.
That's got to be inspiring.
It is. It reminds us that true transformation doesn't come from guilt or shame, but from a place of love and acceptance.
Yeah. It's not about beating ourselves up for our mistakes, but learning from them and moving forward with that joy-fueled strength to do better.
And notice how this transformation isn't a solo mission. They're doing this together.
Yeah, right? They're supporting each other, holding each other accountable.
It highlights the power of community in our faith journeys. We're not meant to navigate these deep dives alone.
Speaking of deep dives, as we wrap up this exploration of Nehemiah, I want to leave our listeners with a question. If the joy of the Lord is your strength, where are you drawing your strength from these days?
That's a great question to ponder.
What are those practices, relationships, moments that fill your tank and empower you to keep rebuilding your own walls?
It's a journey, but remember, you're not alone, and that same grace that empowered the Israelites is available to you today.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive for today. We'll see you on the next one. Happy exploring.